My name is Violet Harper. I'm 29 years old. And until the afternoon of my wedding day, I honestly believed I was marrying into a respectable, loving family. I'd spent 3 years with Mark, completely blind to the quiet arrogance and constant snobbery running through his entire family. His mother, Evelyn, was the ringleader. She carried herself like some kind of old money queen, always looking down her nose at anyone who worked with their hands, including my parents, Arthur and Eleanor. My parents weren't wealthy. Not even close. My dad spent 35 years teaching high school carpentry, and my mom owned a small neighborhood bakery. They worked hard every single day, saving every extra dollar so I could have opportunities they never had. When Mark proposed, they didn't hesitate for even a second. They handed over every penny of their life savings, $45,000, to pay for every single detail of our wedding. Every flower arrangement, the elegant 5-course dinner, the open bar, and the gorgeous ballroom inside the historic estate were all paid for with money my father earned through decades of honest work. Meanwhile, Evelyn contributed exactly nothing except criticism. She constantly made passive-aggressive remarks about my parents' simple taste, and every chance she got, she reminded everyone that her family belonged to the local country club. It was honestly pretty messed up. Still, my parents handled every rude comment with grace. They refused to create drama because all they wanted was to see me happy. They had absolutely no idea Evelyn had been planning the biggest humiliation of all, or that the man I was about to marry would just stand there and let it happen. The ceremony itself was beautiful. For a little while, everything felt perfect. But the second we walked into the reception hall, that perfect illusion completely fell apart. I'd stepped away for about 10 minutes to straighten my dress and catch my breath. When I came back into the ballroom, I immediately spotted my parents standing near the double doors leading to the catering kitchen. They looked uncomfortable, holding their dinner menus with forced smiles, almost like they didn't know where they belonged. Confused, I walked toward the VIP head table positioned directly in front of the dance floor. It was supposed to have 9 seats, 4 for my parents and me, and 5 for Mark, his parents, and his siblings. Then my stomach dropped. The beautiful custom place cards my mother had carefully handwritten were gone. Sitting in those seats instead were Evelyn's distant cousins and her country club buddies, laughing, drinking champagne, and acting like they owned the place. Evelyn stood beside the table adjusting one of the floral centerpieces. I stopped behind a decorative pillar just a few feet away, close enough to hear every single word. She leaned toward Mark while he adjusted his cufflinks and quietly sneered. "I moved your in-laws to table 14 near the back doors. Honestly, sweetheart, they look way too poor to sit up front. Their clothes look off the rack, and having them in the family photos would totally ruin the aesthetic." I froze. Holding my breath, I waited for Mark to shut her down. I expected him to defend the 2 people who had literally paid for this entire wedding. Instead, he just shrugged. "Yeah, you're probably right, Mom," he replied without the slightest bit of concern. "They're simple folks anyway. They'll probably be more comfortable back there, out of the spotlight." In that moment, it felt like every ounce of blood rushed straight to my head. I stepped out from behind the pillar, locking eyes with Mark. He jumped the second he saw me, his face instantly turning pale. Before he could say a word, I grabbed his arm and pulled him into the quiet hallway near the coat check, away from Evelyn's watchful eyes. "Fix this, Mark," I whispered, my voice shaking with anger. "Put my parents back at the head table right now." He stared at me, already looking uncomfortable. "They paid $45,000 for every single thing in this room, and your mom shoved them next to the kitchen like they don't matter." Mark rubbed the back of his neck and avoided eye contact. "Violet, come on. Don't make this into a huge scene. It's just seating." I stared at him in complete disbelief. It wasn't about the chairs anymore. It was about respect. And in that moment, I realized I had no idea who I had actually married. In the next part, I'll rewrite the confrontation between Violet and Mark, leading up to her taking the DJ's microphone and making the announcement. It's not just seating, I fired back, my fists tightening against the lace of my wedding dress. It's about respect. Your mother called my parents poor. She actually said they'd ruin the wedding photos, and you just stood there agreeing with her. Mark let out an irritated sigh, his expression shifting from uneasy to downright patronizing. Because she kinda has a point about the pictures, Violet, he replied. My family's got a reputation to maintain with our guests. Your parents are simple people. They don't even like being the center of attention. Why are you making such a huge deal out of something this small? You're seriously gonna ruin my mother's special night over seating arrangements? My mother's special night. Those 4 words hit me harder than anything else he'd said. I just stood there staring at him, almost waiting for him to realize how ridiculous he sounded. But he didn't. Instead, I finally saw him for exactly who he was. He wasn't the caring, dependable man I'd fallen in love with over the last 3 years. He wasn't my partner. He was a grown man who was still terrified of disappointing his snobbish mother. Worse, he was completely willing to throw my family under the bus just to keep her happy. Something inside me snapped. The hurt was still there, but it was quickly being replaced by absolute clarity. I took one slow, steady breath, stepped back, and looked him straight in the eyes. Okay, I said quietly. I won't make a scene out here. For just a split second, relief washed across Mark's face. He actually thought I'd backed down. Big mistake. I turned around without another word and walked straight past him, heading directly toward the DJ booth on the far side of the ballroom. Behind me, I heard him call my name. Violet, babe, wait. I didn't even slow down. The DJ looked surprised as I walked up beside him. Hey, could I borrow that for just a second? I asked, already reaching for the cordless microphone. Before he could respond, I gently lifted it from his hand. He stepped back, looking completely confused. I tapped the microphone twice. The sharp sound echoed through the massive ballroom, instantly cutting through the soft jazz music and the chatter of more than 150 guests. Within seconds, the entire room went silent. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned toward me. At the front of the room, Evelyn glanced over with that same smug smile she'd been wearing all evening. She casually smoothed the wrinkles from her expensive silk gown, clearly assuming I was about to give the traditional speech, thanking her family for hosting such a beautiful reception. She had absolutely no clue what was coming. Across the ballroom, I spotted Mark weaving through the crowd toward me, panic written all over his face. He knew. Somehow, he knew exactly what I was about to do. I straightened my shoulders, adjusted my grip on the microphone, and faced the crowd. Good evening, everyone, I began, my voice calm, steady, and echoing clearly through every speaker in the ballroom. I'd like to take just a minute to talk about family, generosity, and respect. The room remained completely silent. You all know weddings aren't cheap, I continued. This celebration tonight cost $45,000. I paused, giving everyone a second to absorb the number. Around the room, several guests exchanged surprised looks. I noticed Evelyn's confident smile begin to fade. My incredible parents, Arthur and Eleanor Harper, spent 35 years working honest jobs. My father dedicated his life to teaching high school carpentry. My mother built a small bakery from the ground up. I turned and pointed toward the back of the ballroom. They sacrificed, saved, and gave up every penny of their life savings so this wedding could happen. Guests instinctively followed my hand. Near the kitchen entrance stood my parents. They looked shocked, embarrassed, and completely overwhelmed by the attention. They paid for every flower you see. I paused. Every plate of food. Another pause. Every glass of champagne. I slowly scanned the room. And every beautiful detail you're enjoying tonight. The ballroom was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. 5 minutes ago, I continued, my voice growing stronger. My mother-in-law removed my parents' place cards from the head table. Several people gasped. She moved them to a table beside the kitchen, because she told my husband they looked too poor to sit with the rest of the family. A ripple of shocked whispers spread across the ballroom. People immediately looked toward Evelyn. Her face turned bright red. She looked frozen. Mark finally reached the dance floor and lunged toward me. "Violet," he hissed through clenched teeth. "Stop this. Right now." He reached for the microphone. I calmly stepped backward, keeping it just out of his reach. "No, Mark," I said into the microphone, making sure everyone heard me. "I'm not finished yet." The room fell silent once again. "And trust me, folks," I said, locking eyes with Mark. "It gets a whole lot worse." I turned back toward the crowd, tightening my grip on the microphone. "The disrespect didn't start with the seating arrangement," I said. "That was just the final straw." The room stayed absolutely silent. About 2 months ago, Mark came to my father asking for an advance on the venue deposit. He told my dad his mother wanted to pay her portion with a joint check, but needed some cash up front to get everything finalized. I paused, letting everyone focus on every word. My father trusted him without hesitation. I glanced toward my dad, who was still standing beside my mom near the back of the ballroom. He wrote Mark a check for $15,000. Several guests looked over at Mark, who had gone completely pale. "But yesterday," I continued, "I found the receipts." A wave of nervous whispers swept across the room. "That money never went toward this venue." I slowly shook my head. "It never paid for the reception. It never covered wedding expenses." I looked directly at Mark before finishing the sentence. He secretly used every dollar of my father's hard-earned money to pay off his mother's massive credit card debt. The ballroom exploded with shocked gasps. People immediately started whispering to one another. Several of Evelyn's country club friends stared at her in complete disbelief. Evelyn looked like she was about to collapse. Her eyes darted around the room as if she were searching for someone, anyone, to defend her. Mark stood completely frozen. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. For the first time since I'd known him, he had absolutely nothing to say. "That's a lie," Evelyn suddenly shouted, stepping toward me. "She's making this up." I calmly reached into the small satin purse resting beside the DJ booth. "I figured you might say that." I pulled out several folded papers. "So I brought copies." Holding them high enough for everyone to see, I continued speaking into the microphone. "These are the payment records, bank statements, and the credit card receipts showing exactly where that $15,000 went." A few guests near the front leaned forward, trying to get a better look. I checked every transaction myself. I looked around the ballroom. The venue was already paid. The caterer was already paid. The florist was already paid. So where did my father's money go? I raised one of the receipts straight toward Evelyn's personal credit card balance. The whispers instantly grew louder. "Oh my gosh. Seriously? No freaking way." The reaction spread across the ballroom like wildfire. Several guests began shaking their heads. Others looked at Mark with complete disappointment. His own relatives couldn't even make eye contact with him anymore. Mark suddenly rushed toward me again. "Violet, please," he begged in a low voice. "We can talk about this privately." I took another step back. "No. You had plenty of chances to do the right thing. You chose not to." He reached toward the microphone again. I pulled it away before he could touch it. "Don't." My voice stayed calm. But there wasn't a single ounce of fear left inside me. I faced the guests one last time. So to my groom. I paused. And to his mother. I looked Mark straight in the eye. "I sincerely hope you enjoy every bite of the dinner." I slowly glanced around the ballroom. And every sip of champagne. Because my parents paid for every bit of it. The silence became almost unbearable. "Tomorrow morning," I continued, "I'll be filing for an immediate annulment." A collective gasp echoed through the room. "This marriage," I took a slow breath, "is over." Without another word, I lowered the microphone and let it fall. Thud. The loud crash echoed through the speakers like a gunshot. For one long second, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then the ballroom erupted into complete chaos. Guests jumped to their feet. People started talking all at once. Phones appeared everywhere as guests began recording the unbelievable scene unfolding in front of them. Evelyn stormed toward me, her designer heels clicking furiously across the polished floor. "How dare you?" she screamed. "You've humiliated our family." "Our family?" I replied, my voice calm but razor-sharp. "No, Evelyn. You humiliated yourselves." Mark grabbed my arm, his face full of panic. "Please, Violet," he begged. "Just listen to me. We can fix this." I looked down at his hand gripping my wedding dress. Then I calmly pulled away. "No, buddy. We're way past fixing this." For the very first time that day, I felt completely free. "Get out." I said it quietly, but my voice was steady enough to silence the entire ballroom. Mark stared at me like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. "You can't kick us out of our own wedding," he shouted, his face twisted with panic and anger. I looked him straight in the eye. "It's not our wedding, Mark. It's mine." I let the words hang there for a moment before continuing. "And every single contract for this venue, from the catering staff to the security team, is in my father's name." The realization hit him all at once. His face completely drained of color. Right on cue, 2 large security guards stepped onto the dance floor. They were the same men my father had personally hired earlier that week to handle the event. I calmly pointed toward Mark, Evelyn, and the rest of their stunned relatives sitting at the head table. "Please escort them off the property immediately. They're no longer welcome here." Without hesitation, the guards nodded and walked toward them. The ballroom instantly erupted with whispers. Guests pulled out their phones, recording every second of the unbelievable scene. Evelyn tried her best to keep what little dignity she had left. "This is outrageous," she screamed. "You can't treat us like this." One of the guards politely stepped beside her. "Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to leave." Her face turned bright red. She looked around the room, desperately hoping someone would step in and defend her. Nobody did. Even her own country club friends avoided making eye contact. As the guards escorted her toward the exit, she tried hiding her face behind her expensive designer purse, but it was too late. Everyone had already seen everything. Mark made one last desperate attempt. He broke away from one of the guards and walked toward me again. "Violet, please." His voice cracked. "I made a mistake. I'll fix it. I promise." For a brief second, I looked at the man I had planned to spend the rest of my life with. Then I remembered my parents standing beside the kitchen doors. Embarrassed. Humiliated. After sacrificing everything they had for us. I slowly shook my head. "No, you didn't make one mistake. You made a choice. You chose your mother's pride over my family. And that's something you can't take back." The guards gently pulled him away. He kept calling my name as they escorted him through the grand oak doors. I never looked back. The heavy doors slammed shut behind them. For the first time all day, I could finally breathe. A few seconds later, the ballroom remained completely silent. Then something unexpected happened. One by one, guests started clapping. The applause grew louder and louder until nearly the entire room was on their feet. Several people even walked over to my parents, hugging them and apologizing for what they had witnessed. My mother had tears streaming down her face. My father simply wrapped me in the biggest hug of my life. "I've never been more proud of you," he whispered. That meant more to me than any wedding ever could. 6 months have passed since that unforgettable night. The annulment was finalized without any complications, wiping away every legal connection between Mark and me. Since the reception ended early, my parents and I were able to recover a good portion of the venue and catering costs for the unused hours. Instead of wasting that money, we finally did something we'd talked about for years. We spent 3 incredible weeks traveling across Europe together, watching my parents enjoy a vacation they had spent decades putting off was worth far more than the wedding itself. As for Mark and Evelyn, life caught up with them pretty fast. Once the truth spread throughout their social circle and the videos from the reception went viral, their carefully built reputation completely fell apart. Local vendors and creditors started asking questions after learning that Mark had secretly used my father's $15,000 to pay off Evelyn's personal credit card debt. facing legal action. Evelyn was forced to sell her exclusive country club membership just to repay the stolen money. Mark's situation wasn't much better. The viral footage eventually reached the partners at the firm where he worked. After everything became public, they questioned his honesty and judgment. Not long afterward, he lost his job. People often ask whether I regret ending my marriage before the first dance. My answer is always the same. Not for 1 second. Standing up for my parents was the hardest thing I've ever done. But it was also the best decision of my life. That day taught me something I'll never forget. Real class isn't measured by expensive suits, luxury venues, country club memberships, or who gets to sit at the head table. Real class is standing beside the people who stood beside you first. It's choosing loyalty over appearances, love over pride, respect over status. I may have walked away without a husband, but I walked away with something far more valuable: my dignity, my family's respect, and a promise to myself that I would never let anyone silence my voice again.